Today, we are going to go and take a look at the sometimes maligned but totally awesome Petromax. Now, there's a lot of people that say some not so great things about this. This is actually a very cool lantern. I've owned them for several years, and I've always enjoyed them. You can get into trouble with them if you don't think things through, but just like any kerosene lantern, they need to be preheated before you can actually light them. And I think that's kind of where people tend to go wrong. They don't tend to preheat them long enough, end up with a great big fireball, and then blame the lantern, where in actuality, if you just preheat it, it'll work just fine. Same thing with like a 237. If you don't preheat with 237 and long enough and try to light it, you're just gonna get a great big flaming mess of kerosene. It's just gonna be bad. So to go through a couple of things here, first of all, I need to replace the mantle on this because it has broke. So you'll get a chance to see how that works. And so I'll take the top off here. You don't have to take the screws all the way off, you just have to loosen them. The screws are not there to do anything than to keep the top coming off. These are rigidly attached to the frame, so this rides on that. So all it does is just need to barely touch it so you don't over tighten it. And then we see the burner top, and the way this is one of the other things where people get into trouble is setting this distance right here. Petromax makes a wrench. There is a specific distance for these. Off the top of my head, I don't remember it, but I'll put it somewhere here in the video. And then you can see what that millimeter distance is. This wrench has got on it, it has for the 500 candle power and the 350 candle power, this distance, so it's a feeler gauge. And so that just basically goes in between here, and as long as it fits in between the nozzle and the top of that U-tube, you're good. What happens over time is that these will sometimes, when I say sometimes, will slip down. So every couple of lightings, you usually have to check it. I haven't figured out exactly what the secret is to keeping that in place. Maybe putting a little bit of muffler cement in there and holding it, and maybe that'll keep it from cruising around. I might try that next, but for right now, I just kind of check it, and it's really simple. I've found with this lantern, I unscrew it, I pull it up as high as it'll go, clamp it down and check it, and that gives me the right distance. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna pull this out, and this is where the mantle is attached to it. I've got a Petromax mantle on here right now, and what I'm gonna do is remove that, and I'm going to replace it with a one of the Peerless ones. Now, I haven't run a Peerless on here yet, so this is going to be a new thing for me. So this is the 500 candle power Peerless. Go ahead and open this up. I've always run the Petromax mantle, so this is the first time running the Peerless on here, so we'll see exactly how that works. They are massive. They are huge. That is a mantle. And so I'm gonna go ahead and make sure this is pushed all the way out at the bottom like I normally do. It seems to be. And then just gonna prop this up here, so just for ease of tying, and just tie her on. And as I said before, I just tie a simple overhand knot to start. And of course, struggle as I might, get that in the groove, sort of. See how that looks. It looks pretty good. Get it more or less unbunched and evenly distributed around. Snug it down a little tight. If you have problems with these knots staying, you can always tie a surgeon knot, which is basically tying, instead of doing one loop with an overhand, you do two. And it kind of self-jams and allows you to lock it in there. Burning these things is a little bit different because the way that this goes in here, because you have to basically put the this back in. And in the past, I've just hit it with the preheat torch, and gone that way. I don't think I'm going to do that this time. I think I'm going to try to burn it outside and then sit it back in here and hope for the best, I guess, right? Yeah, so let's see what happens. Okay, mostly went to plan. So that's just kind of burning off here. So while that's happening, we can put this top back on. This top has got two ways that you can put it on. There's a right way and a wrong way. This right here is a little butterfly valve inside the U-tube, which you can use to adjust the brightness of the lamp, and you always want to turn it to get the maximum brightness. So you want to make sure you put the lid on there in such a way that this gap is aligned with that. You can put it on here 180 degrees out of whack, and then this support will block it. It's like that on every single Petromax. So just keep that in mind. Set it down. Try not to breathe too much of this smoke. And there we go. Just kind of snug down. So we're looking pretty good to start. I've got just regular straight kerosene, no Amish mix or anything like that in here, and which it burns totally fine and totally odorlessly. It's really good at that. The only weird thing about this one is that I don't have a control knob for this. So what has happened is that I've ordered one, and in the meantime, I have to actually reopen this because I got to check to make sure whether my needle is up or down. You do not want to pressurize this with the needle down, which this is in the proper orientation, because basically it'll just pump raw kerosene up there, and then again you'll have a fireball. So you don't want to do that. So normally the way this has, it has an indicator knob, and the knob that's on there has an arrow on it, and if the arrow indicates what the pricker is doing. If the pricker is up, it means the foot valve is closed and you will have no flow of fuel up to the top. If the point is going down, then the needle is down, the foot valve is open, you'll have full flow of fuel to the vaporizer. And so right now, I just checked to make sure that it's up. I'm just going to do this to open the valve. My problem is that I actually ordered a control knob for this back in November from the UK, and it's taking over 2 months to get here, and they said they shipped it. So I'm still waiting for it. So anyway, trying to move this along a little bit, so I make sure that I've got my relief valve is closed. The indicator would be pointing in the up position, and you'll see I've got a cheater here because pumping these things up takes quite a bit of air. So I have a bicycle pump, and I have a bicycle pump adapter. So to do this, this makes it really easy, and I'd recommend someone getting one of these if you're going to have a lantern like this. If you're out in the field, you can always have one of these, which is a CO2 cartridge. Plug it on there, hit the button, it fills it right up, and off you go. Once these things get filled, they really don't need a whole lot of maintenance in terms of pressure. They hold pressure for a long time, and you rarely need to pump them. So I've got this screwed in here, this on here. I've noticed, and I'm going to do this now, that when I have seen the valve move, you have to get about 20 psi into there, just ticked, for it to actually start to move. And let's see, so now I'm at the red mark, so we'll stop. We will leave this hooked up because we're going to need to continue to add pressure. And now, favorite part, starting the preheat torch. So what you want to do is you want to let this run for about a minute. And so the torch is pretty awesome. Get this so you can see that. But the torch is pretty great. I'm watching my pressure here. It's going down semi-rapidly. This is why when you have to pump it by hand, this is something that is a real pain, because you got to try to keep up with the amount of air and fuel that this requires, because it does go through quite a bit. So you would basically be pumping furiously this entire time. With this, I can kind of afford to sit back and kind of watch it a bit. So we'll just kind of see what it's doing. Mantle's wiggling around there a little bit, that's fine. Hopefully we don't tear it up too much. It's usually not a problem to like over preheat these. In fact, I would recommend preheating until you just like start to see things start to glow. Okay, so what I'm gonna do, I think it's probably pretty good right now. I'm gonna give it a couple more pumps. I'm gonna pull this off so it's out of the way. And then we're gonna light it. And you light it just by basically flipping this 180 degrees. And off we go. So this actually looks terrible. I had a little problem with it lighting before. I didn't preheat it long enough. I checked the video and that showed it only preheated for like about 40 seconds or so, which is really too short for kerosene. You really need to be about a minute to a minute and a half. So pumped it all up. It's all ready to go. I'm gonna go ahead and be ready and set a timer so I don't get anxious. But we'll just start this preheating up and we'll see how she goes this time. A little finicky sometimes. It's kind of cold in the shop here, so, and they may be running a little low on fuel too, so I may need to put a little bit more kerosene in it. That should start the timer. Obviously with this you can just, you know, count 1001, 1002, whatever it is, and do it that way. But generally once it starts ripping along, it stays lit. Also, if you're having trouble lighting it, you may try starting with a lower pressure and then bringing it up. Like start at like 1 and then bring it up to the red line. I was just starting on the red line because it usually works pretty good, but here down in Texas we don't have a whole lot of cold weather to deal with, so it probably starts a little easier for me usually. The important thing to remember with this is that you got to make sure you turn the fuel on before you shut the preheat off. Otherwise, you'll just basically ruin all your work. And you know, these things are kind of finicky, right? So you just kind of have to make sure you're methodical about them. Check that gap on the air tube to make sure it's right. Okay, this tells me we've had it running for about a minute. I'm going to go ahead and pump it back up to the red line. And then pull this, because we won't need it. And then we should just be ready to go. There we go. Instant full brightness. And that's the way it's supposed to work. I wish I had this knob. It would make it a little easier instead of having to finagle with the crescent wrench. But that's how they work, and that's how they should work every time. You just got to make sure you preheat them enough. There's no overburn. You don't see flames shooting up in here. Everything's working just the way it's supposed to. So if you do have problems starting your Petromax, there's a good chance that either the YouTube setting is not right. You have to use the Petromax gauge and on the 500 candle power setting for this particular one, and get that set right. Heat cycles tend to make that YouTube move. I haven't really found a good solution for it yet, but I'm about to try some muffler cement because it's a little annoying to have it move up and down every few cycles. And then the other thing is just simply not preheating enough. You got to make sure you get it at least a minute in there, a minute and a half. And yeah, with a bicycle pump, it certainly makes it a whole lot easier to be able to do that, because pumping it with just the pump that's on the side, it's a lot of pumping. And but once you do get it going, it'll stay lit and it'll stay bright for a long time before you need to pump it back up. I mean, you're several hours probably before you need to repump it. That's it. That's the Petromax. So if you see one, grab one. I think they're fantastic. I love both of mine, and even my dad's got a couple of them, and they're great. They're great lanterns. They really are. So that's it. So until next time, keep them lit.